Hello, and welcome to the inaugural, I think the inaugural is the word for the first ever thing, episode,
Yeah.
excellent, of Character Witness. Now, today I have a very special guest, somebody who has been in every single campaign I've ever played, apart from the ones I DM'd at work. It is my good friend, Ryan, and he's going to talk to us today about his characters and why they're so cool. Because a lot of the time, when people play D&D, they have a character that they really like, but the only person who ever gets to see what the characters do or the other people in that game. Sure, you can talk about it online and stuff, but it's just not the same as just getting down and really just going into depth in your character and showing like the process, how you made to create them and all that shit. So, without further ado, I'm going to get straight into it. How are you doing, Ryan?
I am pretty good. Although, I'm kind of disappointed with the introduction that you gave me, to be honest. I thought I maybe deserved something more grandiose for the inaugural
We don't have
numero.
we don't have trumpets in the budget.
Oh,
Sorry.
we don't have anything in the budget.
I don't have a budget. I'm actually recording this from a wheelie bin, so
And it's my wheelie bin.
exactly. I'm not paying any rent for. So, before we go into the characters and stuff, I just want to just go into why you started playing D&D. Like, what was the first inkling that you wanted to play?
Man, I think we maybe tried playing D&D a really long time ago.
Oh boy, did
Um,
we.
Yeah, with varying degrees of success as well. So I think maybe we maybe played about like 8, 9 years ago, maybe, and it was always one of those things that I was kind of interested in.
Yeah.
I enjoy anything like all avenues of D&D. I think some people might enjoy the RP more, some people enjoy the stories or the combat. I just absolutely fucking love everything about D&D. But I think most of all, I love being able to like improv, with a group of friends,
Yeah.
and being able to build something together. I think is a big thing for me.
Yeah, I think the first time we ever tried to play D&D was in Bill's house many moons
Yeah,
ago, and the skeletons were
yeah,
too hard to fight, and we tried to pick a
yeah,
fight with some old people in the tavern. But I
yeah.
guess, like, that's part of the appeal. Like, anything can happen. Like, you want to go on grandiose adventures to fight dragons, and then you end up getting the shit pasted out of you by some old men in a tavern.
Yes. Sometimes that's the way the dice goes. Sometimes that's not the way the dice go, and that's just what they had planned. But I think either or, like I'm always, I never want to like deviate from what a DM has planned, but I always
Yeah,
want to like, I always like being involved in what the DM has planned. So if they give you a scenario, what can you bring to that scenario? What can you do? What can you change about that? Or how can you interact with someone else about it? So I
yeah.
think there's not really anything that does the same thing quite like D&D.
Yeah, like I think it's good to push the limits of what a DM will allow you to do within reason. Like recently, at the end of the last episode of our campaign that we're both in, I tried to push my luck and got arrested at the end. So that was
Yeah,
fun.
I feel like if you've not went and got arrested in a campaign, like it's kind of like the rite of passage in D&D. Like sometimes you're just going to do something stupid. You're probably going to get arrested. But
Well,
it's just one of those things that has to happen.
I've just realised I've been arrested twice playing D&D, both on my current character's father in the same exact city that my current character's just been
By the same
arrested in
people,
by the
by the
same
same
guy.
gods.
It's gonna keep a thread going. So as you say, you really love everything about D&D. So with that in mind, how many games are you currently in at the moment?
So we play one together.
Yep.
We play over Roll20, which is a very big group. And
Yes.
then we play with Mike, and then me and Mike also play a home game that we play in person.
Hmm.
That group hasn't been around for as long. We've still got about maybe sort of 30, 35 sessions in, which is a decent
Yep.
amount of time. But what I like is that we've been playing for quite a while now. We all know our characters, we know the rules, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And those guys was a very different like the only people that had played Pathfinder. Everyone was new to 5e.
Hmm.
Nobody had really played D&D before besides like me and Mike. So it was nice to sort of be a part of such a different group and see someone who's completely new have like a completely fresh take on a character and on how to play the game and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, let's move on to the meat and potatoes, as they say, of the podcast. So we're going to talk about your characters. First one, who is sadly no longer with us anymore, is going to be Devin Goldhand. My, some might say my arch nemesis.
I think plenty would say arch nemesis, party included, most likely.
So if you
But
could give a short, just a summary of the type of guy or the type of character Devin was, that would be great.
yeah, I think it's kind of difficult because who Devon was and who Devon became are two different things. Like at the very beginning of the campaign, it was a he was a thief. He had ulterior motives. He was a coward.
Yeah.
He was very selfish. But he was interested in the party, seeing him as some kind of big hero who was, more important than he was and more capable than he was. And I think that, I mean, we played for quite a while, but I was glad that it kind of evolved from that into something else. And I think that's kind of a recurring theme with the characters that I like to play as well. But I would say coward with a heart of piss is probably is probably the best way to describe Devin in a nutshell.
I would say I like maybe it wasn't as apparent for like the other members of the group, but it was for me because I think a lot of the time like you were trying to fuck with my character who was a pacifist half orc barbarian at the time. So I think I had the most rapport with you just because you were teaching me how to read or my character how to read. I just want to clarify I can read in real life. And I think it was a case of I noticed like at the start you would stay out of things, but as time went on, you eventually started doing things like running in the battle, even though you had like 12 HP, because he was made of paper.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he was a coward for good reason. I think is the most important thing. It wasn't like he was he was a fighter and he was capable and he had all these massive stats. He was very incapable,
He knew his
very
limits.
yeah, I absolutely knew his limits, knew when to be there, knew when to not be there. And a big part of that was kind of navigating a scenario and being like, okay, I have this weedy, pathetic character who's
Mm-hmm.
not that great. How can I sort of navigate around this problem? How can I contribute it without, without like with staying true to the character at the same time?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, if they play like cowards or if they play people that aren't good in fights, they'll just not fight and they'll not contribute, and then that's when you're just a detriment to the party and kind of to the game. But
Yeah,
I think
I think that's the obstacle when people want to stay too true to the character that they've made, and they don't give concession to like maybe situations would change them slightly. So like, say you make a character like my character's angry all the time, but like realistically you can't be angry all the time. There will be times where a fight will break out and your character is fatigued. He can't be asked to just be like, oh okay, I'll just autopilot through this. So it's interesting for me as someone who didn't. Well, I don't think many people knew, or maybe they found out during that period where, because I was moving house and stuff and didn't play for a while. But like, what were his ulterior motives? Because I never found out.
Sure, yeah. So, when I first created Devon, he was just a arcane trickster. And the story was that he was going to multi-class into a warlock. He had been tricked into, well, kind of tricked, but sort of goaded into this pact with a an evil creature while not being an evil character, and was forced to do these things like sacrifice people, send them to this temple that was in the middle of nowhere, so he could, so his patron could grow in power and grow in followers. And that was kind of leaking out towards the end. But it was sort of that conflict between who am I sending? Do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to still, keep being involved with this warlock when I know it's with his patron rather, knowing it was, going to be leading to more dangerous things.
So, like, cause from my perspective, at least on my character before I left for a while, because the last thing I saw of Devin before he got fucking annihilated was my character didn't agree with you killing some dude. My guy kicked you in the face because my character is like Captain America, like good is good, evil is evil, like
Yeah.
don't murder people for no reason. Did that have an effect on him going forward? Like you said, he was conflicted, or was it just a case of I hate that little upstart with his purple pants? What
No,
does he know?
it definitely contributed. And I always like I don't want something like that to have no consequences
Yeah,
because it was a good RP moment, so I wouldn't want to just gloss over that. And I mean, immediately after we were like, I'm not going to stay in a party with someone that's just knocked me out.
yeah,
So a little bit of background for that as well. So this guy that I stabbed, he was a bad guy.
yeah,
We were kind of split on whether we should kill him, whether we should let him go, and I told him that I would let him go so long as he answered my questions.
yeah,
Um, I also had an ulterior motive where this patron, Vendrush, um, a magic user
yeah,
with the blade that I was given from the patron. So I had like a packed weapon, and I needed to kill someone with that weapon. So I
yeah.
thought it was just a good opportunity to get that done. He was a bad guy, probably deserved to die anyways, and that's what sort of caused the conflict. But yeah, it definitely had an impact. I think it had an impact on the campaign as well. You know, we had a time skip after that.
Yeah.
I didn't play Devin for a little bit of time. You know, after that, while he was in the keep and things. So yeah, it was nice to have something happen like with consequence, and then hope to either rectify that in the future or have it grow worse, or have something come after it. Yeah.
Hmm. So, you said you didn't play Devon for a while afterwards. Who did you play after the time skip?
So I played. So it was a couple of people played different characters just because it didn't make too much sense at the time to continue with the same party. We kind of sort of fragmented in three directions. So I played a character maybe for 5 or 6 sessions called Odd.
Yeah.
He was a Warforged um, paladin.
Mm-hmm.
So he's max paladin. He went Oath of Ancients, and I wanted someone who was going to be completely different from Devin, mechanics wise, but also like
Yeah.
personality wise. Because I felt like I feel like if you were gonna, it was fine to have like recurring themes and that sort of thing, and I do like playing the same sort of characters.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't make sense to put one character on the shelf and then play a very similar character. So I think him and Odd are probably the two biggest deviants from in terms of like character perspectives. But he was a lot of fun.
So just going back to Devon for just a moment, what was the inspiration behind him? Did you see like a character on any specific like form of media that you thought I'd like to play something like that? Like was he based off anyone?
Mm, I think there was probably a couple of people that he like drew like inspiration from. Like there was definitely, like a bit of pirate, a bit of like Jack Sparrow and stuff in him. He
Yeah.
was kind of like Han Solo, like that sort of like charming rogue was sort of the backbone of who I wanted him to be because
Yeah.
his only good stat was charisma. Um, so I think if you were going to pick anyone from sort of like pop culture stuff, I would probably say like a less cool sort of Jack Sparrow, Han Solo kind of hybrid.
Fair.
Um, can't really think of anyone that would have been picked together. He was definitely sort of like led sort of like a double personality. He had a set personality, and maybe what he wanted to actually be perceived as was something completely different. So even though he was a coward, he wanted to be perceived as heroic. So in that extent, there's the Harry Potter character I think called Gilderoy Lockhart.
Is that the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher who lies about everything?
Yeah, the
Yeah, I
ginger
remember
one
him.
who
Yeah.
hasn't. Yeah, he's got no discernible qualities. He's a total sham. So I think part of that is probably a good comparison as well. You merge those three characters. I think
Yeah,
that's
that's,
probably the
that's pretty
closest you
accurate when I
get
think
to
about
it. Yeah.
Devon. But yeah, no, I definitely understand the comparisons there, having interacted with Devon a lot. So let's move on to the character you play at the moment. Another piratey guy, and
Yeah, I guess a bit of a recurring theme. Yeah.
I have to ask you something about the character of Jax
Hmm.
because I never got an answer for it because I wasn't there when he was introduced. Um,
Right.
why is he blue?
Oh, he is a air Genasi.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to play like an interesting race.
Yeah.
I played a Warforged, and before that I had played Variant Human.
Hmm.
So again, it was just something that I really wanted to explore. I did have a look at a load of different Genasi, um, but I settled for Air Genasi because of I had sort of made with the other characters. I had an idea of what I wanted to play beforehand.
Yeah.
With Jax, I had an idea of what I wanted to be to the party because we had just had a near TPK.
Yeah.
So at that point we had to figure out what did we need in terms of the group. I didn't want to play someone who was going to be pathetic in combat again after playing Devin. And I was kind of torn on whether to play a high charisma character. But I think because I had played Odd, who was a dopey uh, stone bloke who had never really spent much time in society. He wasn't charismatic, he wasn't smart, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Sort of like fit the gap. So I like enjoyed being able to play someone who had absolutely tons of charisma
I
again.
think I've noticed a trend in myself and some of my friends who do play D&D. They'll like zero in on one stat that they'll have tried out once, and then they realize it's so useful that they keep gravitating back to
Mm.
characters about that. So I think yours is
Hmm.
charisma, mine's agility, because I started off as a barbarian, so strength was my main thing, and then I was testing out like
Hmm.
agility classes, like I did a ranger for a bit, and it was just like
Yeah,
now I consider agility so useful. Like every character I make, I'm like, even if it's got no agility, like I'll make a sorcerer, and I'm like,
gotta get a little
how
bit.
do I
Yeah,
put
yeah.
agility on this guy? How do I
Yeah, I
make it
think like
rational?
yeah, I mean, dexterity is just a really good stat to have. Like, you can benefit from, even if you're wearing like heavy armor, like, there's some things that dexterity are still going to be really handy for. Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely, even, I mean, even Odd now, because I've been leveling him up in the background, has 16 charisma. So I definitely think it's not anything I very normally play as like a dump stat. I never really, have it 8. Um, in the home game that we play, I am playing an 8 charisma cleric.
Mhm.
But that's kind of like is I wanted to play like an anti charisma character where it was they're charismatic, but they're absolutely the wrong way about it. If that
Yeah.
makes sense, kind of like you wouldn't describe the Hound as a charismatic character. He's not good with people,
But he's
but
very quick witted, like he's snarky. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. I would say he's got charisma, but that doesn't mean he's a
No,
charismatic
I definitely
character.
feel that. The Chaffinch, my current character, he has 8 charisma, and he's
Hmm.
the loudest, talks a lot, but it's because he's so insufferable that he's got -1
Yeah.
charisma. It's just
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly the same.
I like
Yeah.
just little details like that. Like I could have just given him high charisma, and even though he's insufferable, he's suddenly like making all of his checks. Well, that's not who he
Hmm.
is. He's overbearing. He's loud.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the reason I thought Jax was blue, because
Okay.
all my character knows of him is that he's some really old dude who's like he's battered and shit. Like
Hmm.
the art that you've supplied for me to put on the video is very flattering to him, because the way he was described to me is like he's falling apart, he's missing an eye, like he's missing
Yeah.
a few fingers. Like I thought the reason he was blue, and like he's always after that ship that he lost. So I
Hmm.
thought something happened. He died at sea, and his body became like blue and bloated as it does in the sea,
Ah.
and he's being brought back to life by some like patron or something. So that's why he's
Hmm.
blue. Like so, for all this entire time until you just cleared it up like 5 minutes ago, I thought he was just this animated cadaver who really likes the sea.
You know what? I think that's a miles better story than what I had actually came up with. So I'm kind of a little bit jealous that that's not the reason. But yeah, I mean, when I had thought about creating Jax, it was initially I want to play someone who is like a really dirty fighter. So you
Yeah,
think like Ric Flair, like dirty, like heel, like eye pokes, like stamping on toes, like
yeah.
scrappy. So I wanted to play. I was thinking, oh well, I could play a monk, but instead of like kung fu and flurry of blows, it's like really underhanded, like jab him in the throat, poke him in the eyes, spit on him, slap him,
Well,
like
that
kick him in
does
the
sort of
shins and the
fit the
groin. Yeah.
archetype of a pirate. So
Hmm. So I was like, I wanted him to be someone who was like fought like a pirate for anything else, and eventually it just kind of grew from there. So I wanted him to be a pirate captain, but I wanted him to be kind of like what's the word when you've like crestfallen, like he fell from grace, like
Yeah.
disgraced.
Like an
I
anti-hero,
wanted him,
basically.
yeah, yeah. So I wanted him to be, I wanted him to have survived the mutiny. I wanted him to have walked the plank and somehow made it back. And I was like, well, how can you make this happen as a character?
Yeah.
And one of the things that an Air Genasi can do, which you probably heard me talk about in the campaign, is that they can hold their breath indefinitely.
Ah,
So
okay.
that's why when he walked the plank and was tossed overboard, he was able to sort of trudge through the ocean.
Hmm.
Maybe spend a couple of like a day or two walking, hold his breath forever, and turn up on some beach somewhere.
See, I'm gonna ask you a question, and I don't know if it's D&D racist or not, so please do check me if it is. With him being an air genasi, why isn't he a sky pirate, not a sea? Why is he a sea pirate instead of a sky pirate?
Well, there was a couple of different reasons. Like I saw Water Genasi, and originally the reason I picked Air Genasi was they get the built-in levitate spell. So you've
Yeah,
seen me cast levitate a couple of times.
I have.
My original idea was he was going to walk the plank, step off, defy gravity, flip him the bird, and just
So
just
long,
leave.
suckers.
Yeah, but I realized it didn't last for too long. After Levitate is done, he's kind of just flopping about, not doing anything. So that's why I had him go through the seabed. And a water genasi can do the same thing. So a water genasi can just breathe underwater, I believe.
Yeah,
So I could have done it both ways, but I wanted all of his spells to be thematically about the wind. So I wanted him to be
so you make your ship faster and stuff like that.
exactly, yeah. So I wanted him to love being out on the open sea, not so much for the water, but for the freedom, for the
Yeah,
wind, for the sailing, that sort of thing. So he's not so much a fan of the water as he is as like the freedom being on the open sea brings.
hmm. So with Jax, where it's similar into like Devin and stuff. Was he inspired by the same people, or was it a sort of you wanted someone who was still a pirate, but it was completely like based on something
Mm.
different, or was it just something you just sat one day and thought this might be a good idea? I wasn't particularly drawn from anything.
Yeah, I mean, when you think pirates, and I've already like talked about Devon being sort of like Jack Sparrow, I don't think of Jackson the same way at all because
Yeah,
Devon was more like all out for himself and very me first and then everyone afterwards. Jax is completely different, even though he's not a nice guy and he's a bastard and he's an evil character and his alignment's chaotic evil. There's nothing that he
is
wouldn't
it?
do for us. Yeah,
He's
yeah,
been he's been very nice to me.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing that he wouldn't do for his crew. And just because like let's say a bandit is chaotic evil, a bandit chief isn't gonna kill all of his bandit buddies. Like he needs them.
Yeah, that's true.
A pirate captain needs his crew. He can't do it the ship himself. So he was. That's why I think he took when we were in the Feywild and we had that big falling out with the party
Yeah,
because some people got left behind. That was like the ultimate betrayal in Jax's mind because you never leave the crew behind. You do everything you can for the crew, and that's
yeah,
part of
yeah.
what being a captain and a leader is all about. And I don't think that's um I don't think that's like at odds with being a chaotic evil character. I think you can be both.
No,
I
if
think
like
people
if he
think like
expects something of someone, like it doesn't matter what your alignment. If you've like got an agreement with someone,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. So I think people think of like chaotic evil as like, oh, I'm gonna kill and steal from everyone. I'm gonna fuck my party over. But
yeah.
I don't really think that's just a good way to play D&D, regardless of what alignment you are.
I think the only
Um,
time that would be applicable is like if everyone was evil, like you're doing an evil campaign, so everyone was expected to
yeah,
like turn the evil up to 11 type thing.
and it's maybe like it's a partnership out of necessity or a partnership out of like mutual beneficial. I don't know what the term is like if it's beneficial to all parties, then
Yeah.
that's why you're working together. And then if it isn't, then that's where you go your separate ways. Um,
Hmm.
but I think a big part of D&D is figuring out why you why your character is one to work with all these people. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be playing that character for very long.
Fair. So next thing I want to ask you about, and you can answer this for both Devin and Jax. What do you think,
Okay.
if any, if they've had one, or in Jax's case, if he's yet to have one, but if they have, what do you think has been your character's most defining moment so far?
I think for Devon, it's easy. I think there's two. The first one would be when he inherited Dunmallow Keep after getting a kick and knocked out from your character.
Yep.
And I kind of think that was a big wake up call for him. He was stubborn and he knew that what he was doing wasn't right, but he was still pissed off that it happened at all. He was still pissed off at the Chaffinch for doing it.
Yep.
But it let him have the responsibility of owning the keep and being away from everyone for quite a while, and then having all of these people to care about, these new soldiers, town folk, people on patrol to worry about when we had the time skip.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of gave Devon a different perspective, and I think that was shown in his playstyle because when we came back and we all converged together, I think Devon, I got to play Devon as more like a leader. Like we had lost our tanks, and we had lost the people that Devon would normally hide behind.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was Devon that was saying, like this isn't a good idea, but it's the right thing to do. We have to stop this evil guy
Yeah.
from being able to do his evil plan, even if it was um, even if it was something that was going to cause like party deaths and stuff. I think new Devon would have had a difficult time walking away from something like that. But I think that was kind of like merging them both together. That sort of when we had that turning point where there was that sort of ultimatum from that bad guy Death Knight. And he's like,
Yeah.
"You'll do this for me, and maybe you'll get your bulk back, but you're definitely not getting this really good weapon you need." And we're like, "Well, I mean, we've got to kick this guy's ass now. Like, there's no way about it. This guy's got to get killed."
Yeah.
And even though we got our asses kicked and we got killed, I think that was a big turning point for Devon to be like, "I am not running away anymore. I'm not running away from this. Like, we have to stand up to this guy."
Yeah.
So I think that was a big turning point, and I would have loved to survive because I think that would have been such a big character moment for Devon. But sometimes that's not the way you go when you're fighting a challenge rating 16 guy with 36 HP or however much Devon had.
Yeah. The dice were definitely not in your favor on that one.
Yeah.
So how about Jax? Like, has he had anything yet? Because I've been around for most of Jax. I think there was a little period where I wasn't, like, just right at the start, because you guys encountered me, like, just, I don't know how many sessions, but so was it before, after, have I witnessed it? Was it something I was a part of? I don't know.
I think there is going to be one that is coming, and I don't want to say too much about it.
Of course.
But I think definitely Jax's perspective on friends and allies has changed dramatically from Jax's backstory. He was a pirate leader. He killed his former captain, but it was for the good of the crew.
Yeah.
The reason he killed his former captain was because the captain was going to turn one of their own members of the crew in for beating up a captive or doing something to the captive that they had. Because like in Jax's mind, like that was the captain turning against the crew. So to protect the crew, Jax killed the captain, took over from there, and was successful for about 10 or so years. And then to do that for the crew and then have them mutiny against him, sort of turns it on its own head, and it's kind of a little bit hypocritical, and it's kind of why he's, I think, a very like human character, because he in the end he grew to be that captain that the rest of the crew weren't happy with, and he was putting their lives in danger. So I think it gave him a bit of like introspection. So I think that's stopped him from just being like, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to kill all of my former crew for revenge because they fucked me over. To I was a bit of a knob, and these new friends that I have, haven't. I would do anything to make sure that they're not going to betray me as well, and I care a lot about them. I think that's kind of. I don't think Jax is the leader of that group, but I think he considers himself responsible for their safety. I think that's him sort of being left over as like a captain and looking out for a crew.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's happened yet, but I think if one was to have happened, it would be getting kicked off the boat and then meeting the new guys.
Hmm. I have a question regarding Jax.
Hmm.
So just the background, obviously, 'cause about the other people who and other people in the campaign know what happened, but there was a
Right.
point where you went one direction, the party went the other. I went back to get you. You
Hmm.
went into this other dimension through an item, and the
Hmm.
item was very heavy, and we were getting stalked by something that just couldn't be killed. So I'm trying to run
Yeah.
away with it, and then there was a
Hmm.
moment where my character, who has just experienced trauma after trauma, and the death of the first party, which he wasn't a part of, so all of his friends are
Hmm.
dead. He had
Yes.
to
Yeah.
drop that item to survive and get another one of his friends, our little companion Noah, who's a little
Hmm.
gremlin thing, to safety, and
Hmm.
then luckily one of the drunk monk in our party punched his way through ice to get back to us, rescued the item. It pulled you out. Everything's fine,
Hmm.
but then you you confronted the party that didn't come back for us, not Ruff,
Yeah.
the drunk monk, but everyone else who just didn't seem to
Hmm.
want to come back for us.
Hmm.
Maybe not Sid, because Sid was in like the process of following Ruff. But and then there was that confrontation. I was also a part of the confrontation, and I said to your character, "I'm the one who left you behind." Like I threw the
Uh-huh.
ball away, but you just didn't. But your character didn't believe me. Like I'm wondering why that's the case when I was telling you just at face value, I threw the ball down. Like I couldn't save you. I'm the one who left you, type thing.
Well, there was a couple of things. So prior to jumping into the bowl, and I was like, "Well, what's the matter? You never taken a shortcut before?" Oh,
Yeah.
I'm in the elemental plane of water now. This is a bad idea. Um, Prior to that happening, it was me, you, and that no, the NPC little gremlin guy.
Yeah.
Um, and we had made such an effort to not leave this helpless NPC behind.
Yeah.
And so I knew that the Chaffinch wasn't someone that was just going to, once I jumped in the bowl, just be like, well, I mean, that's him taken care of. I guess I'll meet up with the other guys now. So it was partially trusting trusting the Chaffinch, but it was also you had picked up and carried the ball. So from Jax's perspective, I jumped through the ball in one room. I came back through the ball in a completely different area that I had never seen before.
Yeah.
So he knows to some extent that the Chaffinch has moved the ball, has took it with him. Otherwise, if he had came back out and he was still in the room that he left the Chaffinch in, in that sort of in that big open-ended space where he initially jumped through the portal.
Okay.
If I came back out there, I'd be like, Chaffinch, that little shit left me behind. Like, but because I was right there with the rest of the group, I knew that you would have tried your best. And it was so I was more concerned with confronting everyone that I knew hadn't tried, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, that
Like
makes
I
sense.
knew we had already went, like 100% in to rescue Noah and make sure we were all getting back. And then I was more concerned with the people that, from Jax's perspective, hadn't made that effort.
Okay, that makes sense. I just thought you were just ignoring my things entirely. Like I left you behind. I pulled my well. I don't think Jax knows, but like my flare gun thing can't harm anyone. It's just like
Right.
and I pulled it on you because you were threatening Nix, and I was
Yeah.
like, yo, like I'm the one who left you behind. Please stop shouting at these people. It was pretty intense. I thought there was going to be fisticuffs. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't worried though.
Well,
Obviously, 'cause I'm the best at fisticuffs in the party, but you know.
well, I wanted to like I warned most of them in advance because I don't want to just like it was the next session
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
didn't want to just go straight 100 miles an hour and be like, all right, pricks, it's time to like throw down. Like we've been waiting for this for a week. But I've had like a week to prep. I've had a week to think of what I was going to say, and then they'd be just completely off guard. So I messaged most of them. I didn't
Yeah,
message Dave, which I forgot about. Sorry,
yeah.
Dave. But I messaged the others, and I was like, listen, I'm probably going to get Jax to say some really mean things. But it's just part of being a pissed off character that thinks he's being left for dead. Like
Yeah, of course.
um, yeah. So it
Unspurned, as
was,
they say.
yeah, pretty much like, especially because it was a little bit of sort of, he trusted those guys, and I don't know if anyone caught on, but when we played at Center Parks and we played it in person, we
Yeah,
fought that massive demon, and things went really badly.
they did.
Um, and I was, like I'm a monk bard. I am not a healer.
Yeah,
But I was pumping out, temp HPs with enhanceability. I was picking people up with healing words as bonus actions and stuff. And there was a point where Ruff went down,
yeah,
and everyone was backpedaling. Everyone was getting the fuck out of there because it was about to explode and cause, catastrophic damage to anyone that was around. And Jax had said to Ruff that he needed to get up because everyone would be a lot more upset if Ruff died compared to Jax.
yes, I
Jax knew,
remember that.
like, yeah, Jax knew that, for the concern of the rest of the group, that people like Ruff and Sid, who are universally liked, are going to be big problems if they go down or if they get killed, especially for a party that have lost a load of allies already. And part of it was just trusting how tough as nails Jax thinks he is, and part
Yeah.
of that was just sort of protectiveness over the rest of these characters that are really young in comparison to Jax, I think, as well.
Just a side note, I think it's very hilarious that our party has three monks, and all three of them are
Yeah.
just fucking batshit insane and just ready to die at a moment's notice for everyone else.
Yeah.
The end of that fight, just to give anyone listening who obviously isn't part of the campaign, basically everything was fucked. We were fighting this big demon thing, but the caveat was like it was going to explode because the planeswalker in our party had more of like a keen sense of what this thing was, and he recognized that it was the type of demon that was going to explode with an immense radius if it went. So if we got to the edge of the map, it would have been fine. But obviously, there's got to be someone behind to finish it off. And all of
And
our
we were
range,
already getting our ass kicked as well. So we
yeah.
had already had like some downs, like some death saving throws being made, that sort of thing.
And it wasn't a case of like just everyone back up, like our planeswalker, I'll just arrow it, because we didn't have any idea of like how much HP it had left. We only knew it looked like it was completely fucked, so it could have exploded any time. We had too many melee people within range. It was a fire demon, so it was just like
Yes.
setting fire to everyone, like it was doing fire damage. My character lost all of his HP like right near the start because he was in a blind rage punching into its
Yeah.
lava skin. And
Sid, the planeswalker, had already went down twice in that fight as well. So for a lot of this, I don't even think he would have been like
he was
capable of
fatigued
doing the
probably.
killing blow.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
And the only thing like my character can do while he can't heal is he can stabilize people. So I would only be able to like make sure they weren't bleeding out and then pull them out. But I was just dead set on like giving my life for the party. And luckily, my darling wife, uh, Laura's character, shout out to Laura, just went, I'll fuck it, I'll try and sleep it, and it had just enough HP that we could send it to sleep, move everyone, like pull everyone to safety, then blow it up. So like, but before we had that, because Laura's fairly new to our group,
Mhm.
and I don't think she's ever played an Arcane Trickster before, so she didn't know like the way like sleep mechanics work. It was just a Hail Mary from like her
Yeah.
perspective. So like, for all intents and purposes, if she hadn't thought to like, oh, I'm just gonna try this, that would have been like at least 2/3 of the party just fucking dead.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely would have had some deaths. I think that might have been the best like sleep spell I've ever seen. It was kind of like, when you're like fighting a legendary Pokemon and you've paralyzed it and it's on 1 HP, but it's just breaking out of all of the Ultra Balls and it's just kicking all of your party's
Yeah.
ass. And then like just one hypnosis is all it takes to just put him out for good, get him sorted, and just get everyone in complete safety.
It was always
Like,
Articuno for me. That icy
yeah.
bastard.
it was yeah, it was just a perfect Hail Mary because because we were playing with 7 people, our
Yeah.
DM really buffs up the HP on a lot of stuff because otherwise everything would just be a cakewalk in terms of DPS, especially for a 3 monk party.
With no healers.
Exactly, yeah. So for it, I think he said it was on like 26 HP or something like
No,
that. So it was ready to blow.
it was 17 because
Oh,
Laura
really?
rolled 18 on the sleep spell.
Oh,
Because
yeah, that sounds about
like
right. Yeah.
Mike wouldn't tell us like how much HP it had left, but it was like 3d8s. I think she had to roll something like that. I know she had to either get 7 or 8 on it, and she got, I think it was above a 6, and then she rolled a 7, and I just fucking
Mhm.
went mental. I was like, oh.
Yeah, we all did.
Holy shit! But to go back to Jax, just in general, don't want to get too bogged down in talking about a campaign. We're gonna look at his character sheet. So
Ooh.
let's have a look. See. Okay, so I've never actually seen this before up close
Oh,
person.
really?
No, absolutely not.
Oh, well, I guess you can't on Roll20. You can only see your own, yeah.
I didn't even see it at center box. Like I didn't look at anyone else's sheet.
Mm.
So -1 intelligence. So that checks out.
Yeah.
I expected him to be higher in strength.
Yeah, so it was a. I didn't know. I know I wanted him to have like, he's old. He's 40 years old. He's seen some shit. Like you said, he's
Yeah,
beaten up. He's got cauliflower ears. He's missing an eye. He's missing a couple of fingers. That sort of thing. And I wanted him to be like over the hill. So I'm not ever putting any of his physical stats up from what they are now.
yeah, that's
I
true.
don't want him to ever be like stronger or anything like that. But at the same time, he's a sailor, so I will send you my skills as well because I think it's important. Because while he does have 8 strength, and I wanted to give him a bit of a dad bod, I
Yeah,
wanted him to be proficient in athletics because it wouldn't make sense for a swimmer, sorry, a sailor, not to be good at swimming or
yeah.
pulling ropes and rigging and that sort of stuff. Um, so yeah, he's very over the hill, very dad bod. So I think 8 strength um,
It does make a
was
lot of sense
appropriate.
because I
Yeah.
thought his strength and constitution were much higher because he seems like every fight we get into, he's like a cockroach and you can't kill him. But
Yeah.
it's also like I think it's his bard school. Like he gets incredible AC, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah. So because he's College of Swords, he gets, instead of just spending bardic inspirations on like cutting words, I don't get cutting words or anything like that. I get the sword proficiencies. So you get like kind of like fighter combat maneuvers.
Yeah,
So you get like attack and flourish where you can attack in a wider arc, hit multiple people. You get mobile flourish where you can push someone for bonus damage and then chase after them. And then
yeah,
you get defensive flourish, which is bonus damage, and then you add your bardic inspiration to your AC. So I already have 20 AC, and my bardic inspirations are D8, soon to be D10. So that's
Jesus,
potentially 28 or 30 AC if you rolled well.
that's quite beefy. I thought my
Yeah.
unarmored monk and my mystic side blades giving me +2
Mm.
AC was good, but fuck me,
Well,
I
I'm glad.
guess.
I'm glad you mentioned that. He's very like cockroachy and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Because I really love role playing. Getting like taking like big damage and making people think that I'm about to go unconscious.
yeah.
And then maybe surviving like one or two more
The
hits.
old Spider Man.
Um, the old Spider-Man for sure. Because even I mean he's got a lot of HP. 89 is
Yeah,
a probably I think it might be the most out of all of us.
yeah. He's got more
Maybe
than me for sure.
I think the only person that might have more than him is Sid or Ranger. But I think
Yeah,
even he might not have more than Jax. But it's a definite choice of mine. So there was a fight when we were underground
yeah,
where we fought those vampire dudes at the bottom of the castle.
yeah,
Um, and we were all really fucked up. And Jax had never been hit unconscious at that point with the
hmm,
party, so it was kind of like sort of like drunken vigor and a bit of overconfidence. And I think I was at like 2 HP, but I
yeah,
didn't want any of the party to know that I was at 2 HP because Jax didn't want them worrying about him. And I mean, I'm the best. And, I've got 20 AC. I'll deflect any blows that are going to come towards me. I'll be fine.
yeah,
So I like being in that sort of situation where you're kind of holding the cards to your chest and just fighting as if as if nothing was ever wrong. So I think
yeah,
that's because you never really see Jax be like, "Oh my god, I need healing. Somebody protect me."
Yeah,
it
that's true.
always seems like he's always just like unkillable and confidence and that sort of thing.
I
So it's
mean,
very much like a conscious decision.
on like a game mechanic level, I think that works. Like it trickles over into real life because I know whenever there's a fight going off, like I don't worry about you because you just seem to have more AC than I can comprehend. I don't worry about Ruff because well we'll probably get on into it when like he does an episode like he's got that vampiric weapon which just heals
Hmm.
him sometimes. So like
Yeah,
I'm not and he's got decent HP to begin with, I believe.
and rage. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and he's barbarian takes off damage for most things. So like I'm not worried about him. The same with Mishkria because you can turn into all these elementals and stuff. So like her
Yeah.
HP isn't actually getting mulched. Um, so I'm not worried about those three. But like myself, I definitely because for a monk I haven't got much HP,
Yeah.
and just like any like I'm always worried about. No, the little gremlin companion that I seem to have adopted. Like our ranger, even though like David does a good job of staying outside of like danger, I'm still
Hmm.
concerned in case somebody throws like a fucking missile at him. And
Yeah.
obviously Nyx is like his character is made to be frail, so like I'm always conscious of like trying to catch missiles that go near him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like you're making yourself out to be a character that's like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. That's definitely worked on me because as soon as there's a fight going on, and like you and Ruff and myself are in the front line, I'm like, we're never gonna die. We're immortal. We'll live forever. So yeah,
And I think going back to the game we played at Center Parks as well, Jax was also one of the characters that never went down there. And
yeah,
I think I was definitely single digits, and I was either like between 1 to 6 HP.
yeah,
So I know like if it exploded or something, I was gonna be fucked. Like
yeah.
I would get wiped out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's part of what I was saying. Jax knows that everyone else would be upset if Chaffinch or like Miscreate would be upset if Chaffinch died and or if Sid or Ruff died, then they'd all care a lot more. So it's kind of just being that sort of I don't know what the word is, like a cornerstone of that sort of like he's not like super tanky,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he's like reliable to be there and do his job and that no matter what HP he's at or what the situation is, he's always going to be doing the exact same thing and supporting the group.
Good old
Um,
parry merchant.
yeah, pretty much,
Give him the old duck dip dive and dodge, whatever it is.
absolutely.
But so I've gone over just about everything to do with Jax and Devin. So next one, you don't have to answer these, as it might
Okay.
give away stuff in the future. But are there any characters that you want to play that you haven't played yet?
Yes, I would love to play more Artificer. Absolutely. I think one of the funnest things for D&D, for me is using what you have, and reacting within those confines to solve problems.
Yeah.
So, and I think Artificer is like one of the best characters for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like for Jax has no offensive spells.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but the only thing that he can do for range is vicious mockery.
Okay.
He's got 11 spells, but all of them are just situational utility. Um,
He does have that giant wall of wind, which he could blow people into oblivion with, I guess.
yeah, and it's came in handy. But it's not like a damage sort of.
Yeah, yeah, I
It
get you.
doesn't do any damage or anything like that.
I'd be a
So
big DPS guy.
yeah, I like, and I mean, if I was gonna do anything like that, I would just go up and punch him in the face.
Yeah.
But I like having those sort of. I think an artificer has like a lot of certain things that they can do that other classes can't, especially with like mechanical servant, and they get a bunch of weird proficiencies and things that not many other character classes get. They can make their own, they get magical weapons. They can make their own magical artifacts and stuff. So it's all really interesting stuff. And I think like I was just saying before that we haven't really played too much of it, but that anti charisma, I really wanted to play an anti charisma character. So
Mm.
in the other game, I play a cleric who's a order domain.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like a military domain. I think it's in like Xanathar's Guide or something like that. And I play pretty much. like a Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine kind of
Yeah,
character,
yeah,
where he's such a straight man that he's like so straight it's like becomes stupid, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
So in our introduction, we had Mike was playing a wild magic sorcerer that was just having wild magic go off all the time,
yeah,
and my character stood up, saw that all this like a fire and explosions were going off, and burst through the inn door, chasing after this character because he was in violation of like fire safety precautions for the
yeah,
town
yeah,
and stuff. So it's just something that was like should be plain, but just being such a stickler and so like
yeah.
so
I think those characters are underrated. Like every like wildly like over eccentric character needs the straight man to play off. So like
yeah,
being the
100%.
being the straight man is sometimes a lot more fun than being the silly person. It's less energy and like it's more room for improv because you got to react to like whatever the other members of the party can throw at you. So I think it's probably like what you said right at the start of the episode. You enjoy the improvisation aspect. So I think being the only like regular normal person who's aware of all the
Exactly.
danger around these
Yeah.
flippant like adventurer types is probably a lot of fun.
And I think part of that as well is just because you play a kind of character like that doesn't mean you can't be the silly person. Like you could be like that character is so a stick in the mud, and Captain Holt is exactly the same. He's such a stick in the mud. He
Yeah,
doesn't understand like like abbreviations and acronyms and stuff because they make no sense to him. That he's almost like ridiculous. So you can still have a lot of fun and you can still be silly while being like perfectly straight man and like completely stone faced.
yeah,
So I think it's a lot of fun, and it's a big difference from the characters I'm playing at the minute.
nice. Well, that's everything I have for you today. That's all my
And I mean,
questions.
we talked forever, a surprising amount. So
We did, but that's what we do here. We talk about characters. But yeah, so thanks for joining me. And don't know when
that's
the
okay,
next
buddy.
episode will be up because everyone's sort of like moving house and stuff. I know Bill is. I know I am soon. So I don't know when the next episode's going to come out. But thank you for joining me, Ryan. It's been a
No
pleasure.
problem. Thank you, buddy.